always used to say you needed wealth to create wealth, and we wanted to change that.
In a region hungry for financial change, Nadine Mezher stepped up to lead the way.
We are not taught how to smartly deal with our money.
As co-founder of Sarwa, she has transformed investing in MENA, making wealth more accessible and affordable to all.
Thinking about how to put your money to work for you and not the other way around.
In this episode, we talk about the world of investing, growing a business, and the biggest myths around money. And how was your experience as a woman in fintech?
Silence.
Let's get into it. Nadine, Sarwa launched during the early days of the startup movement in MENA. What inspired you guys to take on the challenge?
Well, I would say it's a lot of personal stories, whether it's, so we're three co-founders, there's Mark, Jad, and myself. And we each went through a story on a personal level that got us to realize there's a need in the market to make investing available for the region in a very easy, simple way, but also to cater to people that are not necessarily high net worth, right? So at the time, financial advisory was really to a specific segment. And we always used to say you needed wealth to create wealth. And we wanted to change that.
What were the challenges you faced launching Sarwa in a market that's just not comfortable with money?
It's very true. I think one of the first things we started working on is to get people comfortable talking about money. And I think the strategy for Sarwa was and still is till today really focused around education. And we went full on how do we get, content out to the market first, because we needed to introduce a few things, right? So we needed to first give people the understanding that there is a way to invest beyond real estate and beyond gold, which is not necessarily within a comfort zone that we have culturally here, but also then on top of this, introduce, Sarwa as a startup, and the fact that we wanted people to trust us with their life saving, which is another layer of challenge that we had to go through. But I think it was extremely important to really get the message of how do you become financially savvy, how do you become financially smart, and how do you build for that future in a way where you're really giving yourself a better future, right? Thinking about how to put your money to work for you and not the other way around.
And what are the stuff that you guys did that actually got people more comfortable with using Sarwa?
So the early days, we did a lot of physical workshops. We realized that to build trust, people really wanted to see us and see who are the people behind Sarwa, what do they stand for. So we used to do a lot of community events. We used to do breakfast. By breakfast, I mean we used to go down to the supermarket, buy a few croissants, and then go up and orange juice. And we'd say, join us for breakfast, and we talk about finance and investing. And then we started doing, so we repeatedly on weekly basis almost, we would do these pizza nights. So after work, come join us. We're gonna go through the, what we used to call the rules of investing and how you can think about investing, and then you can have free pizza. And people started coming. We listed all the channels where you can actually reach your audience, and we started tackling them one by one. And one of them was also press, right? So going to the media and telling them we have an interesting story, we are from the region, and we really want to build something special for the region. And that also got us, attention that was unpaid, because as a startup, you really also need to work on the unpaid channels and earned the trust within the community too.
Speaking of, did your vision evolve from the very beginning, or has it remained the same?
So the details would change, but I think for every founder, you've been a founder also, I think the North Star remains the same. So to us, it was always about how can we make investing available, democratize investing, and bring these tools to the region. And also really focus on education. So we anchor on smart investing. We realize also that our clients, once they have that information, they want to experiment also from their end. So it's not always just about saying this is what you need to do, but have access to all of this information and think about what works for you, right? But at least provide this as a platform for how you can do it in the right way. Of course, personal situations differ from place to place. But I think a mission of a company remains that kind of anchor, that guide of why you build it. Now, how do you get there? The path that allows you to get there will always change. I mean, that's really the startup world, is you need to adapt and pivot. And to me, consistency and adaptation, they don't oppose each other. They actually go hand in hand. You're consistent on the big picture, but the small kind of ways to get there, that you can tweak all the time.
I love that. And in terms of bringing the idea to life as well, talk to me more about the business model. Who did you have to partner up along the way for you to come out with an investment platform like this?
I think you asked a very good question, which is the challenge, right? And I think as a financial institution, the first challenge that you need to go through is the license, is the regulation. And what we wanted to provide that with Sarwa was something that wasn't here in the market. So there was no license to actually get. But we were lucky enough to be part of an accelerator in the beginning that was government-led. And that allowed us to really sit with the regulators and have a very conversational approach into what we're trying to build. And I have to say that, regulation here is very different than a lot of places in the world. They're very business friendly and they want to innovate and they want to see where you can take that innovation. That said, the role is about protecting end clients, right? And enforcements of laws and regulations. So how do you get to where you want to get within that framework? There was a lot of work that we've done at Sarwa, and we were the first to get that innovation testing license. So we were the first fintech to be regulated in our category. And it was working with the regulators to be able to get there. So I think that's the number one challenge for any fintech, any financial technology that's out there, is getting regulators to approve you and give you that license.
And I think, though, with that, the challenge is, especially with regulated fintechs, is you need money up front for you to get the license. But then how do you convince investors to invest in you if you don't have a product out?
It's a very good question. How do you convince investors? I think everyone asked that. Look, I think our approach was building relationships first. It was really going to investors specifically who came on board at a later stage when we wanted growth because they saw us grow. So there was that relationship being built as we go. So it wasn't from the get-go, hey, give us your money. It's, by the way, this is what we're building. We're going to keep you posted and updated. And one day when you feel that, wow, this is actually something that you want to be part of, then it becomes easy to plug. That said, to start, you needed that initial investment. And that mainly comes with friends and family and people that really trust you on a personal level and know your track record and your ability to execute, right? I think that's the most important thing. We had amazing supporters from the get-go from our community. We were also lucky enough to have a VC that was really starting also at the same time as us. So they were a startup by themselves and they saw the opportunity. And one of the partners was in the States, and he saw how much financial services in North America were, providing this type of democratizing investing, and he saw the opportunity in the region. So they came on board with a check at very, very early stage. That also helped to open doors later.
I'd love for you to tell me one moment where you felt like, this is just not going to work out, like things are going to fall apart, because we talk a lot about like the good stuff, which is great. We should, recognize our accomplishments, but sometimes things are not that great. So maybe tell me about that one time.
There was, times in the market when things go really well and everyone gets excited about buying stocks and there's influx, of clients, and all of a sudden everything freezes and people are like, but I want to buy it right now. And I think that's a good problem sort of to have, is when you have that extra growth and demand, but also that can very quickly have negative impact on your reputation of, you need to be able to scale very quickly. So these are learnings that as we grow, you actually take with you. the time when we decided to focus on profitability versus growth at all cost. And that came with, moments of that's going to be very hard because we're going to have to be lean, which means you're going to have to let go of people that, are good people because you hired them on the team. So these are moments where, as a founder, you feel really responsibility and you try to do it in the best way possible. But the reality is these are hard times. And all you can do is go through them with as much empathy as possible, I think. You know what we say, like for founders, it's a mix of optimism and stubbornness. And I think that's super key is to persevere, right? Because the journey of an entrepreneur is not easy. And yes, we talk about a lot of the success stories, and it is an incredibly rewarding journey, for me at least. I love it. But there are moments where you're like, this is too much to take. There's a lot of, it's you're dealing with so much at the same time, especially in the beginning, especially when you're a small team and there are a lot of layers that you have to kind of work on. And you're in execution mode and you're in doer mode and you're also in strategic mode. So when you combine all of this, the initial phase of a founder, you're going to have to do accounting and admin and bookkeeping and customer support and operation and marketing. And we all tapped into a lot of different departments until we had departments, right? So there were tough nights, there were tough moments. And I think for me personally, also the fact that I'm a mom and you have the kids at home, you really, time management is a skill that I like to think I excel at right now because you have to, because that's the only way you're able to make it.
Tell me more about financial inclusion. Is definitely something you're passionate about. I'm passionate about as well. But some of the work that you've done around that, because you've talked a lot about now educating the consumer, right? So what was Sarwa's role in improving financial inclusion and educating these consumers?
So we looked into all the different channels when we started is how can we actually provide that information? So there were a few things. We worked a lot on SEO in the beginning, so search engine optimization, which is we started creating a lot of content on our website. So blogs and videos and on our social platforms, so social media played a big role for us. Then, like I mentioned, we did a lot of workshops. So everything that we do in education is free. Right? So we never considered charging for that. So the workshops were open for everyone. And it was fascinating to see that there was a big hunger for learning. And then we started shifting to virtual, doing a lot of webinars. We did B2B2C. So we'd go to corporates and tell them, listen, there is so much data that shows when your employees are not stressing about their finances, they're more productive and more happy at work. So let us help them take control over the finances. Because there was also, there was a lot of data points in the market here that shows people were not saving enough. There was also people that were spending beyond their means. So we wanted to start even back there is how do you look into your finances and you think about where are your income sources, but what are your expenses and how do you balance between the two? We went to schools and universities. And I think I'd love if we had a much bigger team and we were able to do that. We'll go even much more to school level because I think kids, it'd be amazing to start at that young generation.
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't even remember what I learned in school. Like, I think if I learned about how to deal with my personal finances, that would have been a lot more helpful. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
And this is your daily life as an adult, right? Once you start going into the world, that's the thing that you need to learn the most.
Yeah, and it's crazy that I only had to learn that when I got my first paycheck, which is too late. And I'm privileged as well because my parents supported me with education and university, and a lot of people don't have that privilege. So I do recognize that. But it's also scary that I only had to think about my personal finances.
Yeah.
After having a master's degree.
But you're right. I think our part of the region, of the world also has that where typically it's the parents that pay for university, right? It's part of the whole, how the system works and how it operates. And you pay back because there are no retirement funds in a lot of our countries. But that's when the kids, with that degree, they pay back the parents. So there's a system that kind of to a certain degree works. But you're right, we are not taught how to smartly deal with our money. And I think I try, at least with my children, to talk to them a lot about that and think about, mama, how to best use your money, and don't get, locked into over-consumerism, and spend on experiences more on things that you don't necessarily need. And think about, your little source of income and allowance, but also some of them actually are generating money. Some of them, I only have 3, but 2 of my kids, they generate money online, right? So there's this, they start to understand a little bit, okay, you know what? I need to start earning. How much am I spending? What's that balance in between? And how to do it in a smart way. I think it's important for kids to learn.
I did try to earn money, but my market was my aunts.
Okay.
So on Thursday gatherings, every Thursday I'd have a different service. It'd be a massage, to a play, to
nice.
Friendship bracelets. But that was my market, my aunts.
It's a good market. They trust execution.
Friends and family, right? I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
Funding tips 101. But more on, you talked about like teaching your kids about money, and you've been around schools as well talking about money, and universities talking about money. What are some of the biggest myths about money and wealth that you have seen?
The fact that investing is complicated. And I know that all 3 of us, my co-founders and myself, when we started Sarwa, one of the key things we focused on in terms of communication is to remove all jargon and uncomplicate, right? I think a lot of the financial institutions that are more traditional complicate things because they need to bring that value and say, we can do it, you can't do it. And I think to us, it was very key to simplify it and to say, it's not that complex, it's not that complicated. And you can do it in a simple way, right? Another thing that on a personal level is for women to invest. I think that's something that we keep seeing, that they think they don't have enough information. But I think once they put that foot into the door, then they realize that they actually do.
100%. And a lot of women around us just give that responsibility automatically to either their father, their husbands, their brother, any male figure in their life, because they think that they don't have the right skills to take charge of their own finances, which is so not true and very sad as well.
It's a big myth, yes. And I agree. I mean, the reality of, I'm pretty sure you've heard that data point that women's portfolios generally, when if the same portfolio held by a woman versus a portfolio held by a man, there'll be a slight outperformance on the women front, because what data is showing that these portfolios tend to be held for longer and touched less, right? So it's just about more of a behavior where they don't necessarily buy and sell. They just like to hold. And that historically has outperformed. So it's a very interesting data point to show also, not only you can do it, but you can also do better.
Yeah. And how was your experience as a woman in fintech?
Silence. Look, it was very interesting. I would love to get to a point where we go beyond that inflection point. And I think there is more and more women entering the field for sure, but not enough. So it'd be great to see this next graduating generation, if it will cascade down again to beyond, university level. Because at university level, the representation is amazing. It's 50-50. Here we have incredible numbers. Between the UAE and Saudi, the numbers are extremely healthy. Now in the workforce, starts to change, because at entry point, you could have similar representation. It just starts becoming less and less the more higher in management you go, and in founding of companies and in investments that go to women-led startups. So these are numbers that are still, unfortunately, extremely low.
So representation is one of them, but what are the things that we need to have in place to help increase those numbers or improve those numbers?
Representation is absolutely key at a young age to show what's possible, what the potential is. Then you can have, there are different strategies you can take. I think it's extremely key. if we're talking about investment into women-led companies, to have more women investors from a capital perspective. Whether if it's firms that invest into startups and founders, to have more partners that are women, again, past inflection point, more even angel investing from women into startups. I think that could be a game changer.
1,000%. We need to see the change from up top. I really do believe in that. In terms of my own experience, honestly, I didn't have as much issues as much as probably age was a bigger issue.
Oh, interesting.
But just having representation, having people believe in you, like even when talking to people in the sector, whether it's the banks we partner up with or the investors, it doesn't feel very inviting for a young girl to go into that. But I would say definitely age was a bigger issue for me.
Any minority in any set will feel out of place and will be at a disadvantage. And if woman is the minority in that space, then women will be at a disadvantage. Because the reality is, in anything we do, there's an unconscious bias. Forget the conscious, right? So you do have a small percentage, but the unconscious comes from us naturally as human, right? You tend to relate to people that you assume have the same base of thinking and frequency of thinking. So if you have men sitting and really are the ones that have control over investment, and then a woman comes in, automatically there's a different consideration that kicks in place. And again, unconscious. The reality is they relate more to men than they relate to women. So if you have on the other side an equal representation, then opportunity becomes equal.
Since we're here reflecting about life,
yes,
you speak a lot about motherhood. Can you tell me about how being a mother changed you in the world of business and leadership?
Beyond my time management skills, if we were to think about role models in our lives, I think the biggest impact we have are our parents. My dad is an entrepreneur. He's always been a big believer in entrepreneurship. He quit his job when he was young and started his own company. And he also had different careers, which is interesting. I realized today that maybe that's also where I'm comfortable shifting directions. My mom quit her job to take care of us when we became past 3 kids, right? So we're 5 siblings. And she's been amazing. I think that's extremely key to make sure that if you're a mom, you consider also the kids to be a priority in terms of their well-being, their wellness, shaping up kids that are confident, happy, but also that are part of a community that understand that we need to have a positive impact around us. I'm personally a massive believer in community and communal and the concept of a village that grows and the role of each individual in that bigger set. And if we go into societies where it's all individual, then structures become to collapse. So it's important that we recognize this. And we recognize the importance of the role of a mom, especially if she's not a working mom, because when you're working, you at least have that value of I'm bringing also as part of the finance, right? I can rely on myself. I can be financially independent. But if you're not, then we need to appreciate a stay-at-home mom that's really building the generations of the future, and to know that this is, unfortunately, in our societies across the globe, is an unpaid role, but it is an extremely crucial role and extremely important. Even if you're thinking from an economic perspective, on the country's economy, it's really that generation that is key for the future, and we should not forget that.
In terms of raising kids and growing a team, are there any similarities?
No one has asked me that question before. Absolutely. I think there are. I was talking to someone the other day and I was telling them, my God, I recognize that because I have kids, my patience is so much higher. Because sometimes, with your kids, you need to understand the stage of development of the brain to be able to communicate with them. That a lot of us adults, we assume, and something that I had to learn We assume that when I tell my child something, they're going to understand me. But the reality is their brain is not at the same level as your brain. So no, they're not. You have to address it in a very different way. And that trained me to think differently, even from a work perspective, is understand the person sitting across from you, their experiences, their personality, what they went through, where they're coming from, and how can you really help that person grow? Because that's going to be a win for everyone.
Yeah, and I think as a founder, you also have visibility on other things that are running. So you might get it, but it might take someone else longer for them to get why this needs to be done as well. But because you have visibility, you can see the full picture, right?
And interesting, now I just drew another parallel, is the characters of the kids, right? So each child has a very different character, and their way and approach to things, and it might be exactly the same thing, is going to be different. So understanding the strength of your employees, right? And seeing that potential and how you can nurture it. As a manager, as an employer, is how can you empower your team to give the best that they can give?
Absolutely. Sarwa actually took a very bold stance, and you guys have a no negotiations salary policy. I'd love for you to tell me the story behind this.
In everything that we do, we're always looking into best practices and benchmarks, and we do analysis and studies. And initially, when we started, it wasn't like that, right? You're a small team, you're hiring people. First employee was unpaid, and she was excited. And so there's a learning curve. And then the more we were growing, we realized we need to have, of course, structure and corporate governance and proper, onboarding and proper processes for hiring. And we wanted to really put in place something that really works. And we realized something that if we're clear from the get-go about the salary that we're offering, then it levels the field for everyone. And it doesn't become a negotiation skill on your employee's side. And the reality is it puts certain people at a disadvantage, especially depending on their background or gender. So some people are better at negotiation. So we didn't want to have that. And we wanted to eliminate that from the get-go and be transparent. And that really worked very, very well.
My next question was, how did the team take it? How did this play out for you guys? Was it easier to hire and find better cultural fits as well?
It was. Now, there was a moment of, again, we were early on, so we were able to adjust and correct course because we realized we started having, the structure of the levels, and for this level, this, and for this expertise, this. And then we started realizing that on the team we hired before, there were gaps. So we adjusted everyone and we fixed everything, right? And we made sure that everyone feels that they're treated the same way. Of course, mistakes were made. It's not we were learning on the job as we go, but now we realize that this really is the best way.
Looking back on your journey, Nadine, any regrets you have in business?
I wouldn't say regrets. I think everything you go through is really learning, really, because I wouldn't be here today if I didn't go through that. And even experiences as a kid, even experiences as a teenager, even in university, everything you went through somehow shapes you, somehow makes you stronger. So I don't like to call it regrets, but as much as I can, I'll try at least to learn something from whatever you go through.
What was maybe something hard that taught you the best lesson?
Appreciate the people you have in your life and don't waste time and don't assume they're always going to be there.
And if you were 21 today, is that the advice you would give yourself, or you'd give a different type of advice?
I think, look, there's two learnings actually. I like that. From the startup world is thinking in problem solving mode. And I think that's amazing because, and I try to also, by the way, teach this to my children, is when you're hit with a problem that's out of your control, don't dwell. Don't just go into a mode of I'm angry, I'm sad, what can I do, panic, No. Take it as it is. This is the issue. This is the problem. This is a challenge. What's the solution? There's always a solution. There's always a solution. Reminded me of something my dad used to say. So thinking in solution mode, I think, is one of the biggest learnings in my life. And I think, my husband would like to claim also some credit for that, but learning to not stress things. And take things easy, because sometimes silly things are just silly things.
But teach me how to. I know I shouldn't stress, but I still stress.
What's
What
the worst
made you-
that can happen? I think you go in life through things that are so much bigger than it makes everything relative. And I know in our region, there's a lot that's happened that puts things in perspective. And I think it's just about appreciating the little things in life and the day to day, and just, again, being content with what you have. I think that is key. That's the key lesson I'm learning recently, is being happy with what we have and not always thriving to have more and more and more. No, it's about appreciating what you have and the precious things that you have in your life.
Uncertainty will always be there, but where are you placing your personal bets in the next decade?
In the industry, there's insane progress on all fronts. I think, of course, we're all talking about AI and the implication of AI right now, whether it's the impact on the job market, but also how it's going to support in other places. And again, I see it with the next generation and the way they use it. And it's starting at a younger and younger age. So it is becoming part of their life. There's no question about that. You need to know how to basically make sure it's being used in the best way. I'm fascinated by everything that's quantum physics and quantum computing. I think that it's going to take some time, but I think it's a fascinating field. And I think I want to see where it's going to take the world, because I think that's, today technology, every change that we have is really throwing the curve exponentially. And I think that's going to take it on a next level altogether.
Yeah, you've mentioned AI, and obviously there's a lot of talk about it right now. It's part of our everyday life anyway today, right? But how do you think AI will continue changing investing?
For now, I think there's going to be a lot more personalized investment happening, whether your customers creating their own agent to help them navigate their financials, or from a fintech perspective and how the application of AI through the new companies that are coming, or even with Sarwa, it's becoming inclusive in terms of the culture in the team. How do you use it? How do you use it smartly? How do you also make sure that it is in compliance with everything that we have, right? So there's a layer of also compliance that we're very much focused on.
All right. And if someone has $10,000 and they want to use it to invest, how should they invest?
Again, I'm gonna be careful about the disclaimer, is that each person's personal situation is different. And we really, on a personal level, we should all do a lot of, due diligence when it comes to what's the best way for us. Do you not have negative and bad debt? Do you have enough saving? Do you have an emergency fund? Beyond that, investing to us is all about being diversified. And that, to me, on a personal level, that's key, is to make sure that your portfolio has assets that balance each other. Something goes wrong, something will be doing better. Geographically, like we said, industry-wise, but also assets, right? So different assets within that portfolio. If you have $10,000, try the Sarwa app. I don't want to do an ad, but go. It's quite simple to use. There's a lot of information, and it should be a fun journey.
Yeah, your journey with Sarwa has been fascinating. But what's next for you? I heard you're working on amazing things.
Yes, I am. So I am working on a new company, on a new venture. I'm still involved with Sarwa, so I'm still a director at the Topco and a board member, and I'm working on a new company that's right now in development.
When will we be able to hear about it?
Inshallah soon. I'm hoping very, very soon.
I don't know, us Arabs, when we say inshallah soon, like give me
our
inshallah frame. We'll be excited to see it. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you.